Dear friends, of the five elements, fire is one of the important elements all over the world. Of all the major symbols in literature, art, and religion, no symbol is more ambiguous and double edged than fire. A fire symbolism can simultaneously denote illumination and purification, and destruction and pain. I repeat, fire symbolism in literature can simultaneously denote illumination and purification, destruction and pain. But what are the main meanings in fire symbolism in literature and art over the centuries is very, very interesting. For instance, in Greek mythology, as all of you are familiar with the symbolism of fire, which is bound up with the myth of Prometheus, explains how mankind came into possession of fire, thus enabling man to form civilizations in this world. Of the four Aristotelian elements, fire is the only one which can create. So, the gift of fire symbolizes kinship between mortals and gods. If you take Hesiod's telling of the story in his Theogony, the earliest full account of the story of Prometheus, man already had possession of fire, but Zeus withdrew it. Prometheus then stole divine fire back from his fellow gods and gave it back to man. Prometheus, being cunning and rebellious, outwitted Zeus and stole the flare of eternal fire from Mount Olympus. In of all things, a tube of fennel. He then took this flame to earth and gave it to men. So we can very easily associate this with the First Nations of Australians, who handled fire in a very, very brilliant way, and they outwitted many people in this world. So the Prometheus myth, unpicking some of the misconceptions surrounding the story, has lot of transformation in the literary history. It is very important to note that these elements, Prometheus as a trickster and as the one who stole fire from the gods and gave it to man, exist in other cultures and other myths also. If you take Polynesian figures who stole fire from gods, and Loki, the Norse trickster god, is associated with fire. As Hans Biedermann notes in his The Wordsworth Dictionary of Symbolism, cultural icons and meanings behind them, these trickster figures are probably associated with fire because of its unstable and ambiguous nature. If you take fire in Christianity, the most famous symbolism of fire in Christian art and scripture is the fires of hell, denoting everlasting torment and punishment for one's sins. In purgatory, fire supposedly purges the soul of sin. And this is an important element of Roman Catholic doctrine also. If you take fire sermon, or in Buddhism also, the fire sermon is about liberating oneself from suffering through detaching oneself from one's senses, including one's desires. Similarly, if you take T.S. Eliot's poem, The Wasteland, written in 1922, the third section of which is titled The Fire Sermon, also reminds us of the use of fire in literature. So fire symbolism in literature is there. If you take Shakespeare's sonnet 45, Shakespeare considers air and fire. The other two, slight air, I quote, purging fire, are both with thee wherever I abide. The first my thought, the other my desire. These present absent with swift motion slide, I quote. Similarly, if you take Hopkins, that nature is a Heraclitan fire and of the comfort of the resurrection. You can also remember the use of fire in this poem also. So we can go on and on, including Robert Frost and also T.S. Eliot in Little Kidding. All these poems use fire, and also if you take Canadian literature, there are a lot of symbolism in fire also. But what happens in Australia is totally different. For literary scholars, fire may be a kind of symbolism for construction and destruction. But for the First Nations Australians, I don't want to use the word aborigines for various political reasons. The First Nations Australians you use fire as a kind of tool, not only for destruction but for construction, is the message that we all of us must learn. I am going to introduce a book. I think some of you might have been familiar with this book, The Biggest Estate on Earth: How Aborigines Made Australia, authored by Bill Gamage, is one of the powerful books that we can read about how people in Australia, the First Nations, managed fire. As all of you might have known, the year 1788 is one of the important years in the history of Australia. This book, The Biggest Estate on Earth, describes how the people of Australia managed their land in 1788 using fire. Unlike the Britain of most early observers, about 70% of Australia's plants need or tolerate fire. Knowing which plant welcome fire and when and how much was critical to managing land. There are three dominant rules that directed 1788 management. Number one, ensure that all life flourishes. Make plants and animals abundant, convenient, and predictable. The third important rule for the 1788 management of the land is think universal, act local. Think universal and act local. So there are illustrations in this book talking about relationship between the nature, trees, and fire. This book also contains records about the fire patterns and the types of fire managed by the First Nations communities. Fire has been treated as friend. I repeat, fire has been treated as a friend. Can we do like that? Is a question. First Nations have stared into save fire for countless generations. They controlled fire and conducted ceremonies. This has become 1888's main management tool. To burn improperly was considered as a sin. In the book talks about this, the problem of how man considered burning improperly was considered as a sin. They decided which land would be burnt, when and how, but in deciding strict protocols with the ancestors, neighbors, and specialist managers. The handling one of the hardest elements on this earth wanted brilliance, intelligence, and coherence. So Australian First Nations had this epistemology, the system of managing fires without any technology. Now we have all technological tools and support, but unfortunately, we find it very difficult to manage fire. Very often we come across Californian fire in the US, but we come to know that many acres of land, many people and many animals are very often destroyed. But we have all the technology, but we are unable to control fire. But our First Nations friends in Australia were not like that. Fire has, the first reason to burn was to control fuel. This doesn't mean today's no fuel, no fire. There are records of fire management employed in late 1788. Burnt and unburnt patches benefit animals also. So they use fire for the biodiversity and to protect ecosystem. Can you imagine? In 1788, most fires were cool. Fire has long and short-term effects on people which differ on what to favor. Newcomers to the land notice fire before rain. There are classifications of correct and wrong burning and or correct or wrong fire. The correct fire is this: lit in the prime time of the year with future vision. The wrong fire is lit in the wrong or unpredictable time of the year and place. Controlled fire gave people limitless burning options. Most fire was to make grass and spinifex. People burnt grass mainly to promote, protect, and restrict plants or to lure game. Correct fire was a horticultural tool. It was not only a tool to control land, it was a tool to control animals, tools to control, to grow plants, and fire sometimes uses as a signal to the nearby land. There are many fire rituals that are nowadays extinct. Fire rituals are very important for the First Nations. Those were the main ceremonies of the Australian First Nations. In explaining why certain plants and animals have gone extinct today, the First Nations say that the relevant ceremonies were not done or done properly. They know well the link between extinction and wrong fire or wrong burning. Fire let people select where plants grow. They know which plants to burn, when, how often, and how hot. This demanded not one fire regime but many. The impact of 1888 fire was slightly seen in climate, soil, attitude, aspect, nutrients, or growth habits suffice to explain Australian vegetation. In East Ernham land in 1946 to 47, Donald Thompson observed as soon as the grass begins to dry, the people start to burn it systematically, always fired in limited areas to keep the fire under control. People lit fire that could announce something of interest or to declare their lawful intrusion. Good things came from fire. It made the land comfortable, comforting, bountiful, and beautiful. They believed, the First Nations Australians believed, that a bad fire was better than no fire. I repeat, a bad fire was better than no fire. First Nations fire to regulate fuel, to make mosaics, to control animals, insects, and clean country to give the land certain look. There are few words or phrases referring fire in their time. For want of time, I quickly go through this. There is one word, Yan Yuva say, Nigarki means barely burnt country. Ruma Lumaringara means lighting small fires in a row to burn a beach front or a large plain. West Ernham landers say, Ambirlu Yawood means low creeping fires. Ari Wurlge means cleaning the country. Wurga means burned ground. Maruta say Niurma means freshly burnt area where Gangaru will feed. Kundil means young grass springing up after being burned. Napal, Napal means burned ground, and Kalla means fire, Kalla. These are some of the words and phrases related referring to fire in the First Nations culture in Australia. Fire in 1788 was mostly planned and precise. It was repeated, hence protected, sometimes organized locally. People accepted its price, and fire was the closest ally. Fire, grass, kangaroos, and human inhabitants all seem dependent on each other for existence in Australia. Just imagine fire, grass, and kangaroos and human inhabitants all seem dependent on each other for existence in Australia. I used to, suggest that the concept of circle was dominating in the cultural life of the First Nations. So the circular philosophy is nothing but they wanted to protect biodiversity. For them, all living organisms are all one. Okay. Today in Tamil Nadu, we observe a day called Social Justice Day to remember Tandai Periyar's birth anniversary. I am also very happy to note the Minister for Higher Education and Social Justice inaugurated this conference. So in that way, I connect how not only fire, some of the important ideologies also unite Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Sometimes Tamil Nadu and some of the indigenous population in Tamil Nadu and Kerala are also close ties with the First Nations in Australia, which is a separate area. Some of the important quotes collected by Bill Gamage in this book, The Biggest Estate on Earth, takes me to quote one or two from Robert Murray. I quote, "The frequency of these fires is that principal cause of the absence of underwood that renders the forest so previous in all directions." I quote. If you go to John Lord Stokes, I quote, met a party of natives engaged in burning the bush, which they do in sections every year. I quote. To take Leaf Scott in 1920s, I quote, "The bush was alive with possums to get up in the trees and burn the possums. The real oldies followed the burning pattern of the natives in keeping the place green." I go to Kimber's observations. I quote, "Knowledge of the locality of previously burnt areas clearly aided men in their hunting." One of the beautiful observations. Second quote, "Some dragon lizards and other small animals don't like the ground after it has been burnt. They go away for a while and then come back when the spinifex has grown again. Some animals like a hopping mouse like it both ways. They move into burned areas to feed and then return to safety in the large unburnt spinifex. Kalaya and Malu, Emu and Gangaru, Emu and Gangaru do not like freshly burnt land, but come back to it after rain has put on the green feet. Most animals and birds love the green feet near water." So those were the observations of Kimber. If you take Johannes Mengi, I quote, "Exactly like the parks I saw in London, the old grass having been burnt by the natives and the new grass having grown a foot high and emerald color out of the black gave the eyes a delightful impression." David Ward says, "Coastal Aborigines were very proud of their ability to anticipate diurnal, I think, the daytime diurnal wind changes from land to sea breeze, so that a strip fire would swing around in a hooked or looped shape, extinguished before nightfall." I can say there is aesthetics in controlling fire. this fire aesthetics is one of the greatest tools handled by the First Nations in Australia. So this book also talks about some of the important facts and how the Australian bushfires were controlled by the First Nations people. If you take the physical and direct impact of the Australian bushfire, over 18 million hectares were burned in the Australian bushfire season in 2019-20. As of mid-January, according to the media reports, it has destroyed over 5,900 buildings, including over 200 and 800 homes. Apart from the human fatalities, many millions of animals are reported to have been killed. It happened in 2019 and 20. But this kind of thing did happen during 1788 remains a question. So the impact also, the impacts of the Australian bushfires are ongoing ecological and biodiversity impacts, created lot of initial devastation of the fires. An estimated billion animals and many more bats and insects are likely to die in total over the coming weeks and months as a result of the lost habitat and food resources. This loss is not a joke. With over 1 million species currently facing extinction, if you continue with the business as usual, extreme weather events such as mega fires become an increasing matter of concern for species survival. It has also destroyed the health system also now, but it is not so during 1788. And also fire crossed borders now. Smoke from wildfires can travel great distances, but they were all controlled by First Nations once. It is often pushed into the stratosphere by the heat from fires. Smoke from bushfires in Australia has drifted across the Pacific and may have reached the Antarctic, according to the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. This has led to hazardous air quality in major cities throughout Australia and affected New Zealand and cities in South America after smoke reached both Argentina and Chile. Just imagine the impact. Mental health cost, economic loss, climate feedback loops. Okay. For instance, the bushfires have not only been made more likely and intense by climate change, they also add to it until the 2019 and 20 Australian bushfire season. The forests in Australia were thought to reabsorb all the carbon released in the bushfires across the country. Global warming is making bushfires burn more intensely and frequently during 2019 and 20. The bushfires have already emitted 400 megatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. According to the Copernicus Monitoring Program, this is as much as Australia's average annual carbon dioxide emissions in just the past 3 months. So these will increase Australia's annual greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to global warming, and heighten the likelihood of recurring megafires that will release yet more emissions. This is a deeply concerning climate feedback loop. Environmental cost, pollution, okay, agricultural impacts, and people's behavior. According to the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and other members of the UN, family will continue to use its digital platform to share accurate information and facts about the science of climate change and how it is increasing the likelihood and intensity of extreme and tragic weather events like this. So the entire mismanagement of bushfire now created a lot of hazards, not only for Australian continent but other continents also. But the First Nations, according to Bill Gamage, did control fire properly, and they have also managed fire for the better, growth of plants, protection of animals, and everything. This book has got nearly 417 pages with a lot of illustration. The pictures are really very good. You can just visualize pictures. There are nearly 60 pictures, along with a lot of the pictures of animals and everything. So I also recommend this book for our students. The book is available here in our center. I think it may be available in the Center for Australian Studies in Kerala University also. So I take this moment to thank you so much for your very patient listening. I congratulate Professor Suja for your brilliant organization of this conference. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Armstrong, for that engaging session. So, because it had a very interesting beginning, a more interesting middle, and also an inspiring end to it. Because you had begun with the trajectory of fire, the reference to this fire ceremony, which is common to almost all indigenous communities across the world. Then indigenous management of fire without any technology. Then wrong fire, the reference to the wrong fire, correct fire, and how correct fire has always been used as an agricultural or horticultural tool by the indigenous communities. So also the insights about fire aesthetics, that too opened up new area of interest to us. So thank you very much for your presentation, sir. And actually, to add on to what he has said, or to supplement, or to complement what he has said, lands, natural resources, they were rather invaluable to the European colonizers. They had technology, as John Ryan had told us during the keynote address, and as Dr. Rajesh Nair, who was the respondent to Dr. Pradeep Trika, he also mentioned the fact that land and natural resources have always been invaluable resources to Europeans who always had technology with them. So lands, natural resources represent life for indigenous peoples and not mere commodities. And they also gave emphasis to the collective rights over land resources. And we have seen that some 370 million indigenous peoples around the world were and are being dispossessed of lands their ancestors had called home for generations. And when we come to Australian First Nations people, for over 50,000 years, the people there, they had cared for their country using special kind of land management that worked with the environment, using traditional burning, fishing traps, sowing and storing plants. They were able to create a system that was sustainable and supplied them with the food that they needed. But when Europeans arrived in 1788, they brought farming practices which were rather unsuited to an environment that was prevalent in Australia, and that might have resulted in the long-term coast erosion and wildfires that particularly occurred in 2019 and 20. So, I also came across what Bill Gamage, the Australian National University professor, Bill Gamage, he's an expert in traditional Aboriginal burning. And he has said that the use of fire could be adopted across the country and used for a variety of land management problems. But at the same time, we have to remember that the adoption of such traditional Aboriginal burning requires a sound understanding of local conditions to ensure that it is effective and safe. Local conditions, climate, plants, and animals all matter, and everything else has to be taken into consideration before we move on to this, before we adopt stick farming or other related things. So your talk was extremely beneficial to the academia who are present here, sir. Thank you so much.